The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It fell like an endless curtain from the gray sky, turning the ground into pools of dark water and mist. The forest that surrounded Valemount Manor was heavy with silence, except for the sound of raindrops whispering against the old stone walls. Inside the manor, Lord Auric Valemount sat near the dying fire, a cup of untouched tea beside him. The flames threw a faint glow across his face, sharp and pale like a ghost's memory. His dark coat was still wet from his walk through the courtyard. He looked like a man who belonged to the rain, quiet, cold, and fading. He had not expected visitors. No one came to this forgotten manor anymore. The villages nearby had long been abandoned, and the roads that once led to the capital were swallowed by mud and time. But that night, when thunder cracked across the heavens, there came a knock on the great wooden door. 3 knocks, soft yet certain. Auric rose, his boots echoing through the empty hall. He hesitated for a moment, his hand resting on the metal handle. He felt it, that strange, distant chill that always came when fate was near. When he opened the door, he saw a girl standing in the rain. She wore a long gray cloak that clung to her frame, her hair dark and wet, her eyes bright as moonlight reflected in water. She was young, perhaps 20, but her gaze carried something ancient, something that did not belong to mortals who traveled alone at night. "I'm sorry to trouble you," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the storm. "But I need a place to stay for a few nights. I heard this manor has empty rooms." Auric studied her in silence. He almost told her to leave. The manor was not a place for the living to rest. It was filled with whispers and memories that no stranger should hear. But something in her tone, calm, steady, and without fear, made him pause. "You came all this way alone?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "I'm used to traveling. The world is large and the roads are lonely. You seem like a good man, maybe a good landlord." There was a faint smile at the edge of her lips, the first smile Auric had seen in years. He stepped aside. "Come in." The hall smelled of wood smoke and rain. The girl removed her cloak and placed it near the fire. Steam rose from the fabric. Her hair shimmered in the firelight, soft and dark, and her eyes followed the carvings on the walls, faded symbols of the Valemount line. "You may stay," Auric said. "But this is an old house. It remembers too much. You must not wander at night." She tilted her head slightly. "And if I do?" He met her gaze. "Then the house will remember you too." The words hung heavy in the air. She did not seem afraid. Instead, she looked around the hall as if listening to the echoes of another life. "What is your name, my lord?" "Auric Valemount, and I am Lyra," she said. "Thank you for your kindness." He nodded once. "There is a room on the east side. It's clean and safe. The servants will bring you food." Lyra looked around. "You have servants?" "Only shadows," he replied quietly. She smiled again, faint but warm. "Then I'll be fine with them." That night, as the rain continued to fall, Lyra stood by the window of her small chamber. The view looked out to the forest, dark and endless. She could almost hear the trees breathing in the mist. Somewhere deep inside the woods, a bell rang once, then fell silent. She turned from the window and noticed something strange. The mirror on the wall was covered by a black cloth. She pulled it aside, and for a brief moment, the candlelight flickered. Her reflection did not move. It stayed still, watching her with quiet sorrow. Startled, Lyra stepped back, and the image returned to normal. The candle flame rose high again. She touched her chest, her heart beating fast, and whispered to herself, "It's just the storm. Only the storm." In another part of the manor, Auric walked through the corridors, his lantern casting long shadows along the cracked walls. He stopped before a locked door in the west wing, the one no one entered. The metal key around his neck glinted in the lantern's light. Behind that door, he could feel it, the pulse of something ancient, restless, and cruel. "Not tonight," he murmured. "Not again." But as he turned away, he thought he heard a voice whisper from the other side, soft, like the echo of a woman's sigh. "You should not have let her in." Days passed. The rain softened to mist, and the manor began to feel strangely alive. The fire burned brighter, the windows cleared, and for the first time in many years, music returned to the empty halls. Lyra often hummed when she walked, soft tunes that made the walls tremble faintly, as if remembering the same melody from long ago. Arik tried to keep his distance, yet every time he saw her walking through the garden or reading by the window, something inside him stirred. She reminded him of someone, a memory blurred by time. One evening he found her in the library. She was tracing her fingers along the spines of books older than both of them combined. "You have so many stories here," she said, "and yet this place feels like it has forgotten how to tell them." "Some stories are better left untold," Arik replied. "Because they hurt?" "Because they repeat," he said. Lyra turned toward him. "Do you believe that? That pain can return again and again?" Arik looked away. "I live in proof of it." The words silenced the room. Lyra wanted to ask more, but she saw the grief behind his eyes and said nothing. Instead, she smiled faintly and said, "Then maybe I can remind this house how to breathe again." That night, Arik dreamed for the first time in years. He saw the manor bathed in sunlight, the way it once was before the curse. He saw a woman standing by the garden, her laughter echoing like bells. She turned to him, and he reached for her hand, but when he touched her, she turned into shadow. He woke before dawn, his chest heavy with a feeling he could not name. Lyra, too, could not sleep. The whispers had returned, faint, distant, calling her name from somewhere inside the walls. She followed the sound through the corridors, her candle trembling in her hand. The manor was darker than before, as if the night itself had thickened. The air was cold, carrying the faint scent of roses and ash. The whispers led her to a narrow staircase that wound upward toward the west wing, the forbidden place. At the top stood the locked door. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the handle. The whispers grew louder, forming words she could almost understand. "Lyra, you've come back." Her candle flickered out. She gasped softly and stepped back, her breath turning white in the air. The silence that followed was heavy, almost alive. And then, a faint light began to glow from beneath the door, soft and pale, like moonlight trapped in glass. Lyra stood frozen. For the first time since she entered the manor, she felt true fear, not of ghosts, but of the strange thought that maybe she had been here before. She whispered into the dark, her voice shaking. "Who's there?" A whisper answered from the other side. "Welcome home." The morning came pale and quiet, but it brought no comfort. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a mist that clung to the walls and drifted through the broken windows of Valamont Manor. It felt like the world was holding its breath. Lyra awoke with a start. Her candle had burned out sometime during the night. The memory of that glowing door in the west wing still lived behind her eyes, the whisper that had called her name, the light that had shone beneath the cracks. For a long while, she sat still on the edge of her bed, her heart beating too fast. It was a dream, she told herself softly. Only a dream. But she knew it wasn't. The manor was alive in ways she did not understand. Later that morning, Lord Arik found her in the dining hall. The long table was covered in dust, but sunlight, thin and gray, had managed to break through the window. Lyra stood there, her face turned toward the faint light as though trying to absorb it. "You look pale," Arik said as he entered. His voice was low, but there was concern in it. "Did you sleep at all?" Lyra turned toward him. "I heard something last night. Someone called my name." Arik stopped in his steps. "Where?" "In the west wing," she said quietly. There was light coming from a door. "I thought maybe someone was there." For a long moment, he said nothing. His jaw tightened. "You disobeyed me." Lyra looked down. "I didn't mean to." "The house." "It pulled me there." Arik's expression softened slightly, though his eyes were still full of shadow. "This house remembers pain, Lyra. It whispers to those who can hear it." "Do not listen. The West Wing holds things that should not be seen." She wanted to ask what he meant, but his tone left no room for more. He turned away, ending the conversation, but as he walked down the hall, Lyra noticed how his hand trembled slightly at his side. Later that day, Lyra wandered through the manor again. She couldn't help it. Curiosity and a strange sadness drew her deeper into its forgotten rooms. The library smelled of dust and parchment. The shelves reached to the ceiling, filled with books bound in faded leather. She ran her fingers across their spines. Many of them were marked with the same crest, a silver moon surrounded by thorns. On a nearby table lay a book left open. The pages were yellowed, the ink nearly faded, but the words were legible. To love beyond death is to bind two souls to the same curse. Lyra's breath caught. It felt like the words were written for her. When night fell again, she lit a lantern and returned to the corridor that led toward the west wing. She knew she shouldn't, but the silence of the house was unbearable. The air smelled faintly of roses again, and the same soft whisper echoed in her ears. Not a voice, but a memory calling her name. This time, the door was slightly open. She pushed it gently, and the old hinges cried out. Inside, the room was filled with dust and cobwebs, but at the far end hung a large portrait covered by a heavy velvet cloth. The moment she stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The lantern flickered, and a faint hum vibrated in the air. Lyra hesitated, then reached up and pulled away the cloth. What she saw made her heart stop. The woman in the painting looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same lips, same quiet expression. Only the clothes were different. Old-fashioned and regal, painted in deep crimson and gold. The background showed the manor bathed in sunlight, with roses blooming in the garden. Lyra stumbled back, her lantern shaking in her hand. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." Below the painting, carved into the frame, was a name written in ancient letters. Ilara Valamont. She stared at the name, her mind spinning. Valamont, the same as Auric's family name. Was this his wife? His sister? His curse? As she stepped closer, she noticed something strange. The woman's eyes in the painting were wet, as if tiny tears had formed there, sliding down the canvas like rain. Lyra touched the surface with her fingers. The paint was warm, not cold. A pulse of light ran through it, and she heard a faint sound, like a whisper trapped under glass. "Lyra," she gasped and stumbled back, knocking the lantern to the floor. The flame went out. Darkness filled the room. The voice spoke again, soft and broken. "You came back." At last, the door burst open behind her. A strong hand grabbed her arm and pulled her back into the hall. It was Auric. His eyes were dark with fear. "Didn't I tell you never to come here?" he shouted, though his voice trembled. Lyra tried to speak. "The portrait, she looks like me." He shut the door behind them, his breathing harsh. "That's because she was you once." Lyra froze. "What?" Auric looked away, as if he had already said too much. "Her name was Ilara, my fiancée. She died the night the curse fell upon this land. You shouldn't have seen her face." Lyra shook her head, confused. "How could she look like me?" "I don't know," he whispered. "But the manor thinks you're her. It's waking because of you." That night, neither of them slept. Auric sat alone by the fireplace, his mind heavy with memories he had buried long ago. He remembered Ilara's laughter, her voice, the way she would hum while walking through the gardens. He remembered her promise that they would break the Valamont curse together. But instead she had vanished, her body never found, her soul trapped in silence. He had sworn never to open the West Wing again. But now this girl, this stranger with the same eyes, had come, and everything was changing. The fire burned brighter. The clocks, long silent, began to tick again. Even the garden outside was showing signs of life. He should have felt hope. Instead, he felt fear. Lyra could not rest either. She sat by the window, staring at the dark forest beyond the walls. Her reflection in the glass wavered in the faint light. "I'm not her," she whispered. "I can't be her." But deep inside, she felt something stir, a flicker of familiarity, a pain she could not name. She remembered things she had never seen, the sound of a man's laughter in a rose garden, a promise made under the moonlight, a kiss that never happened. Tears filled her eyes. She didn't know if they were her own or memories that weren't hers. The next morning, Lyra found Auric in the courtyard. He was standing in the rain again, though the sun had begun to peek faintly through the clouds. The light touched his face, but he looked lost in thought. "Tell me about her," Lyra said softly. Auric didn't turn around. She was the only light this manor ever knew. She was strong, brave, foolish. She believed curses could be broken by love alone. Lyra looked at him quietly. "And you?" He smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it. "I believed her." "That was my mistake." They stood in silence, the sound of the rain falling lightly on the stones. Lyra finally spoke. "If this house thinks I am her, maybe it's giving you a chance to end what began long ago." Auric turned to face her. "No, some things cannot be undone. The curse feeds on hope. If you start to believe, it will take everything from you." Lyra met his eyes. "Then let it try." That night, the manor grew colder. The windows rattled as the wind howled through the halls. In the west wing, the portrait glowed faintly once again. A single tear rolled down the painted cheek and fell to the floor like a drop of light. Lyra lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Every sound of the house, every whisper and creak, seemed to be calling her name. She did not know if it was warning her or welcoming her. In the silence, she heard Auric's voice faintly echo in her mind, the words he had spoken earlier that evening. "The manor thinks you're her, and if it believes it long enough, you might become her." A chill went through her chest. She closed her eyes, whispering a trembling question to the dark. "Who am I, really?"